This is the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Texas Pete, drama for your mouth. Bob Fossella, Hans Heiser, week 11 of the college football season. And I'll tell you what, Hans, it has all been turned upside down.
It has. Auburn got it started yesterday, 3:30 against Georgia. Georgia showed up the opening drive, and then the rest is history, man. What a impressive, dominating performance by the Auburn Tigers, who have to figure they're going to be the top-ranked 2-loss team. And look, the reality of the situation is they're going to play a #1 Alabama and then possibly a rematch with Georgia in the SEC championship if they can get that done. And if they do that, you'd have a hard-pressed time keeping them out of the tournament.
Well, I'll tell you what, the new rankings are released Tuesday night. Committee gets together. Any doubt Alabama's #1?
No. Alabama's 1. I think where it's going to get interesting is going to be #2. I've seen, a lot of different speculations out there, whether it's Oklahoma, whether it's going to be Clemson, or whether Miami's still undefeated. A lot of people have Wisconsin now being undefeated in that top 4. Big win over Iowa yesterday for them. I think their toughest game is coming up outside the Big Ten Tournament Championship. They'll host Michigan coming up. Michigan on any given day, they can play with anybody. So we'll see. A lot of football left to play. And if you're the Georgia Bulldogs or a fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, love to hear what your thoughts are today. Hit us up on the Facebook Live page. But yeah, disappointing loss yesterday, but it's how you grow from that loss. And look, everything's still in front of that team.
It is. You control your own destiny. I will tell you, this is my thoughts. Alabama's 1. Miami's #2. Miami's still unbeaten.
Coach Rick, man.
#3 is going to be Oklahoma. Get another win over a quality team. And Clemson is going to be #4. They're still going to be inside. They thought yesterday's win, you go back a month and a half and you're thinking win over Florida State, that's going to be a huge victory. It's going to score some great points, but win over Florida State is just a victory. But a lot of teams do control their own destiny, including Georgia, including Auburn likely, and Alabama. All control their own destiny.
Well, Georgia losing yesterday opened up a lot of spots for some of these one-loss teams. Washington, who we didn't mention, of course, they get beat on Friday night. Looks like the Pac-12 is going to be left out of the conversation. But the thing about this coming week, and you and I were talking a little bit about it off the air, there are no games worth a flip next week. I mean, honestly, we do see some surprises now and then, but outside of Michigan, Wisconsin, you got a couple games in the SEC we'll talk about at the end of the show that may play in the SEC. But, I mean, outside of that, I don't think on a national landscape you're going to see any major shakeups next week. It's going to be the final week that we see all the changes.
All right, as Hans said, hit us up on the Facebook Live page. Comments are already rolling in. It's interesting. The first 10 weeks of the season, I think we're dominated by Georgia Bulldog fans. I'm not seeing quite as many this morning, just saying.
They're probably still in bed. They're probably still in bed, man. What a tough loss for Georgia yesterday, but I liked all the things that were said in the locker room after the game by the team.
All right, since we're mentioning it right now, let's go to the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Texas Pete, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. There is the final from the Plains, 40-17. Georgia scored on its opening possession, and it was War Eagle the rest of the way. Man, oh man, did Gus Malzahn's team look.
They did, and they were battle-tested. This is a team that went to Clemson week 1. They lost a close one at LSU, so this is a team who has been on the road in the SEC. They've had some challenges, whereas Georgia really hasn't been tested. I think we found out yesterday Notre Dame was a fraud. Notre Dame is a fraud. I'm sorry. I mean, they were just completely outmatched in that game last night at Clemson. It was over before it started. I'm sorry, at Miami. That's what I meant to say. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just Auburn was very impressive to me. Their front seven dominated the line of scrimmage. And here you go. You got 2 weeks until the Iron Bowl. Alabama last night, they had some questions on defense. We'll talk about that game later. But that game's up in the air as far as I'm concerned. Auburn was that impressive yesterday.
You know what? The first drive, I watched Georgia just march down the field, mix in a couple of passes, and I'm thinking, man, this is going to be a tough Georgia team to stop today. But 3 plays in the first half completely changed the complexion of this game. The drop touchdown pass by Ridley. That ball is there. He probably takes it the distance. Georgia scores again. Walker, the penalty on the punt, which gives Auburn possession instead of turning it over. They march down the field. Tigers score there. And then Hardman with the muff punt.
That's 21
that
points.
kills you.
That's 21 points you gave away right there. The other play you didn't mention was the flea flicker. I mean, the flea flicker where it was a great call. Harmon was wide open, but just didn't have a time. And it gets back to the offensive line yesterday. Here's a team that has dominated their opponents, although maybe not that good of an opponent, it looks like, some of the teams that they've actually won this year, some of the games rather. What did they have yesterday? What is the number here? 46 rushing yards? Yes. And let's talk about the penalties here, Bob. These were self-inflicted wounds. You talked about the drop. You talked about the special teams penalty on Walker. But it was just all day long. Midway through the third quarter, they had 77 yards of total offense, 75 yards in penalties. That's all you need to know. That's a recipe for disaster.
Got to talk about Kerryon Johnson. He was a beast in this game. Imagine how good the Auburn ground game would have been if Petway was available. You know, he's over 1,000 yards for the season, carries it 32 times for $167. And they were talking throughout the game, you know, hey, Auburn may need to rest him for the fourth quarter. Well, you know what? That wasn't really necessary.
No, the conversation here locally in Atlanta from Georgia fans on the radio and whatnot was saying, oh, well, Cameron, Johnson, he gets the ball 35, 40 times a game. He's not going to be able to do that against Georgia. That's just way too many times to give one guy the ball. The heck with that. They can't give him the ball enough.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, he is something special. And, credit Gus Malzahn and the play calling. I thought they kept Georgia honest with a lot of the razzle-dazzle plays early on, some throws downfield where they had to keep Georgia honest, where on the other side of the ball, Georgia didn't have to keep Auburn's defense honest because they didn't have anything downfield. So all Auburn did was load the box and say, Jake Fromm, here you go beat us. I don't know that he had opportunities to beat him. There's some questionable play calling in this game outside of the first drive. Georgia would run it on first down, either go backwards, get a yard, and then it'd be second and long. And I bet 90% of the time yesterday, Bob, on second and long, they ran it again.
It seemed like Georgia is convinced that they can run the football anytime they want.
Last night we found that.
No, they're not. Jarrett Stidham. I think there were still some question marks about him coming into this game. 16 of 24, 214, 3 touchdowns, no picks. This against what we thought was one of the best defenses in the country. Against Clemson, he gets sacked 11 times, only gets sacked twice. He looked like the real deal. Yeah,
he did. He made some great plays with his feet, extending plays, stepping up in the pocket, avoiding pressure, drop-off passes to his tailbacks. I thought he played maybe his best game of the season when you take into consideration the defense that he went up against. And then again, the comments after the game from the Auburn Tigers, Gus Malzahn and Stidham as well, this is a dialed-in group. They said, we knew we were going to have our hands full today. We're going to enjoy this, but we understand what we have moving forward and the opportunity that's presented itself for us. And I expect him to continue to get better. I really do.
Well, one of the things I really liked is he did a great job of selling some throwback screen passes.
Sure did.
I mean, you're thinking the plays designed to the right, and bam, he throws it back. He did a great job of suckering in that Georgia defensive line. Lorenzo Carter did not have one of his best games for the Dogs, and Stidham took advantage of it.
It seemed like Roquan Smith and 10 other guys out there.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah, he was outstanding. But here's the thing with Georgia. If you want to be optimistic about the future, what's in front of you, you mentioned the drop passes, the penalties, the muff punt, 21 points that you could have gotten back. Those are things that are correctable, right? You had the 2 audible plays where Auburn burned you with the screen passes, the tunnel screens, where they sold out the blitz. Auburn changed the play at the line of scrimmage. They go 65, 60 yards both and score touchdowns. Those are fixable. What would concern me as a Georgia fan is that either your opponent, Alabama or Auburn, who you're going to play in the SEC championship, as their front seven's as good as there is in college football. How do you fix that offensive line between now and then? That would be my concern as a Georgia fan.
It's funny or interesting, I should say, how the Gus Malzahn dynamic changes with the result of one game. Can't beat your arch rivals. Comes into this game with a 7-2 record. He's on the hot seat, so to speak. Now he's 8-2, controls his own destiny. Auburn does. As far as not only the SEC is concerned, but the entire national picture everything changed with the result of this game.
Yeah, and with Gus Malzahn, his MO for years has been to start fast and kind of piddle out there in the second half. And so, you had the missed field goal by Georgia going in the locker room, which was big momentum for Auburn, but Georgia gets the 3 and out they needed. The muff punt, you were expecting Auburn to get maybe outcoached or outplayed. That was a huge swing of momentum there. And credit Gus Malzahn and his staff and Kevin Steele for sticking to the game plan and executing it flawlessly from start to finish. I mean, this is as good as a game as a Gus Malzahn team on both sides of the ball has played. It was very impressive. But with that being said, you're talking about things changing. If Alabama comes in there and blows them out, all of a sudden the conversation changes again. So we'll see what happens.
All right, next up is Kentucky for Georgia.
Yeah.
How do the Dogs bounce back from this? Is Kirby Smart able to get the attention and focus of this team? Because they really weren't focused in yesterday's game. The penalties, the mistakes, the self-inflicted wounds, that's all on this team not being focused.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a very dialed-in Georgia team next week at home against Kentucky and then again against Georgia Tech, and a very prepared Georgia team for whomever they play in the SEC championship. I think you learn from adversity, and the thing that he's got going for him in his favor is that this is a team with a lot of seniors, especially on the defensive side of the ball, so they have those leaders in the locker room that can get everybody back together. So I expect Georgia to come out of this a better team than they were before that. This was a game that they needed to have. They needed to get their butts kicked and understand that things aren't just going to be handed to them, and we'll see how they respond. I think it'll be well, and hopefully they can end this thing on a good note and compete in the SEC championship game.
Well, I bookmarked a couple of comments on the Facebook chat live, but I can't even find them now. A lot of War Eagle on there. A lot of Alabama folks saying, yeah, nice win, but wait till you get us. All right, you want to say something?
One of the things I keep seeing on here was saying, as I told you, and this is from several people, Georgia was overrated all season long. Is that a conversation? You see what happened in Notre Dame last night. Georgia really hasn't played anybody outside of Mississippi State.
Well, how good is Notre Dame? Notre Dame beat the snot out of a lot of pretty good teams, including USC.
Right.
I'm just asking. Notre Dame looked awful last night.
Yes.
Notre Dame looked terrible, but Georgia goes into Notre Dame, wins that game, beats a very good Mississippi State team that Alabama struggles with. Now, granted, Georgia played them at home. Mississippi State played Alabama at home. I understand that, but I don't think you can question how good this Georgia team was. Number one, maybe not. Top 10 team, absolutely.
Are they a college football playoff team? Are they, to you right now, one of the top 4 teams in the country?
No.
Yeah.
Not today.
Just outside.
But I'll tell you what, you get to an SEC championship game and you beat an Auburn team that beat you.
That's what, if I'm a Georgia fan, that's what I want. I want a chance to prove, you want to be able to beat the team that just embarrassed you on national television. Yeah, Alabama, that's a nice story in its own, but if I'm a competitor, I want a shot at Auburn. I want to play them again. The way that they were talking, they were in your face, they were physically dominating you for 60 minutes, and they were letting you know about it. I mean, if you watch the game, every single play, they were in Georgia players' ears telling them how bad they were, how they were overrated. So it's all there for Georgia if they want to respond to this. But if I'm a Georgia fan, that's who I want. I want Auburn in that SEC championship game as a rematch. Winner take all, go to the playoff.
One of the comments from an Auburn fan says, we'll move up to number 6. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. I think Wisconsin will be 5, and I think they'll be 6. That's about right.
All right, let's go back to the big board, the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Last night, Alabama trailed a lot of this game, but at the end, when push comes to shove, Tide get it done 31-24 as they come from behind. They score twice in the final 10 minutes. Nick Saban said, we needed a game like this.
Right, and it's kind of back to our point about being battle-tested, going on the road. Real quick, before we talk, how are these cowbells legal? I mean, really, how can somebody say that that's okay for everybody in the stadium to bring in a cowbell while the other team's trying to call plays? I'm just curious.
I just wouldn't want to sit there the entire game with those cowbells. I have been in the press box, but the windows were shut, so I didn't have to hear the whole thing.
So it's just interesting to me. But, Mississippi State played a great game. Jalen Hurts, man, what can you say about this guy? The plays he made to Calvin Ridley with the game on the line, and Alabama's inability to run the ball early on, 44 yards in the first half, he said, well, maybe Mississippi State team's for real. Maybe this Todd Grantham defense is going to be able to do this for 4 quarters. Not so much. In the fourth quarter, Alabama's running game dominated. They go on that huge long drive. They had no answers for him. Hurts hooks up with Ridley for the game-winning touchdown. Interesting end of this game, by the way, where Mississippi State gets the penalty. They get a second shot at the Hail Mary, and Fitzgerald throws it out of bounds.
Yeah, that was a big-time mistake. The first 3 quarters of this game, Mississippi State had the ball for almost 34 minutes to 11 for Alabama, and I'm sure you caught the stat last night. Alabama gives up 3 rushing touchdowns for the first time in the Nick Saban era.
3.
I mean, how is that possible that in a decade you haven't given up 3 rushing touchdowns in a game?
Maybe he beats his players if they give up rushing touchdowns. It's unbelievable. But, to your point, I don't think the time of possession is a real conversation in this game when you're trying to break it down, because at the end, Mississippi State was scoring on their possessions, but it was 3 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards. They could move the ball incrementally down the field. Alabama was, every time they got the ball, they were just right down the field.
I want to talk about Jalen Hurts. He's never going to have the best passing numbers.
He made some plays last night. The throws on the run
is just a winner. That winning touchdown pass was a thing of beauty. He threaded the needle on that. Perfect throw. 10 completions in the game, 242 yards. And he handled the blitz to perfection on the last couple of drives. Mississippi State was coming with 5, even 6, and kid never got rattled.
No. He was very impressive last night. You can make an argument that he's the most valuable player in the SEC. And he kind of flies under the radar because the expectations for an Alabama quarterback coming off a freshman year who came up a little bit short in the championship game is a Heisman Trophy. Well, he might win one of these before it's all said and done, but I thought his leadership last night, especially in that fourth quarter on those drives where the defense really wasn't getting the stops that they needed, and we'll talk about Alabama's defense in just a second, but he single-handedly put the game on his shoulders.
Yeah.
That 4th and 4 play that he made when they were down a touchdown, that possibly could have been the ball game. There's about 7-8 minutes left in the game, but Mississippi State, everybody in the stadium knew he was getting the ball. He was going to be the guy to make a play with his feet. There was nothing they could do about it. I'm a big fan of Jalen Hurts.
There was no one even close to him.
No.
I mean, here you go. 4th and 4, just take the first down, not a problem. Got to give props and kudos to Nick Fitzgerald. Tough as they come. He only threw for 158 yards, ran for 66, but I'll tell you what, this kid is a player. Even Nick Saban says, man, you got to give it up for this kid because he is just a tough-as-nails kid.
Man, and running straight at the Alabama defenders. How many times do you see a quarterback, try to find a way to get out of bounds? You don't want your quarterback taking hits. I thought on the goal line early on where they needed to get that touchdown to take the lead, Dan Mullen kept calling his number. I was thinking, my God, they're going to kill the young man. But he knew how tough he was. He goes straight at the linebacker, he gets the touchdown, goes over the sidelines and throws up. Yeah. I mean, he was tough as nails. And here's the thing I saw last night real quick on him that was interesting. He's 700 yards away from catching Tim Tebow as the conference's all-time leading rusher at that position. By the way, he's coming back next year. So when it's all said and done, he's going to be the leading rusher at quarterback position in SEC history. Tremendous potential for that team next year, I believe.
All right, let's talk about Alabama. You mentioned the defense. With this banged-up defense, and it showed last night.
It did.
It showed last night. With this banged-up defense, is this the number 1 team in the country? I mean, they are going to be in the polls, but in your mind, is this the number 1 best team in the country?
I think so, but it's really hard right now because I don't see a team that's unquestioned the number 1 team in the country.
No.
I think you can make a case for every team in this conversation that still has a chance to get in the playoff, what their deficiencies are, and how limited they are because of that. Yeah, Alabama, I mean, what is it, 4 out of their 7 linebackers are out for the year? And credit Mississippi State Dan Mullen for going straight at that. This is something they are going to have to address quickly before the Auburn game. Because let me tell you something, Kerryon Johnson, Gus Malzahn, that offense, they are going to go straight at them, and they're a little bit more talented than Mississippi State is, no disrespect. And I think Auburn playing at home, it's a different animal, man. Ask Georgia. This is shaping up for one of the historically great Iron Bowls on paper, and we've had some great ones.
You're the odds maker. What's the line going to be on that game?
Oh, man.
On the Plains.
If I
Is
had
Auburn actually going to be favored in that game? Auburn was the underdog against Georgia. You called the game right, but Auburn was the underdog.
Yeah, they should have been the favorite. You know what? That's a great question. I tell you what, if I'm a betting man, I don't see anybody going into Auburn right now. But the question is, can Auburn replicate what they did against Georgia yesterday? I mean, they made Georgia look like a run-of-the-mill SEC East team. That was just a darn near perfect game from them. Can they do it again? If they do, they're going to beat Alabama by a touchdown.
Well, the only downside to that is now it's on film for Nick Saban to game plan for. You know, you don't want to give Nick everything you have, and Auburn threw out all the stops in that game.
Well, here's the thing with Alabama. They mentioned it yesterday. At one point early on in the game, because of the injuries at linebacker, they had 8 5-star Under Armour All-Americans on their defense on the field at one time. Now, granted, 2 of them were true freshmen. So that's what the problem is with Alabama's defense right now. It's inexperience. So it's up to Coach Saban, it's up to that staff to get those guys up to speed in time for Auburn. You know they have the athletic ability, but can he get them to where they need to be 2 weeks from now? Only time will tell, but his history indicates that he will, in fact, get them ready. And the fact of the matter is he's working with some pretty special coaches and players.
All right, I want to get your comments off of Facebook Live. Danny Lawson, all you Auburn fans, remember what happened to the last team who chanted, "We want Bama." Just saying, you might get more than you want.
Right. Hey, Calvin.
That was, by the way, Vanderbilt who lost.
Yeah, well,
I think it was
Vanderbilt
59-0. I know. I'm not comparing the two.
You know who the X factor is in this. You know Alabama's going to be able to line it up and run the football at will against anybody. It's Calvin Ridley, man.
I'll tell you.
Calvin Ridley, my goodness gracious. That was the best game I think he played all season long. And I think going into the year, he was the guy on paper that had potential to be, a Amari Cooper type deal, to really be the focal point of that offense in the passing game. And he hasn't been. Things have just been off a little bit, but man, did he get right last night. He is a tremendous difference maker. If you load up the box and you let him go one-on-one out there, he's going to beat you every single time.
Kenyon says the lack of linebackers for Alabama will be the difference. Jeremy reminds us that Jalen Hurts is now 23-1 as a starter. Not bad.
20 years old, by the way.
Yeah. And Amy says, Jeremy, nerves of steel. How do you argue with any of that?
It's going to be set up for a good one. Now, neither one of them play anybody next week, so we'll have to wait 2 weeks to get to this. So they can say they're getting ready for Mercer. Alabama can.
Right.
Okay, but we all know what's really going on here.
All right, let's take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Texas Pete, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. South Carolina holds off Florida 28-20. Gamecocks win their 7th game of the season. Florida falls to 3-6. Haven't won since September. I will say this. Randy Shannon's team didn't quit. Played hard yesterday. They really did.
Play hard. You know what the difference in this one was? They get the interception from Bentley, one of his 3 yesterday, in their own territory. They're taking it to the house.
That's their season in a nutshell.
Guy fumbles the ball on the 1-yard line. Carolina recovers it, runs it 20 yards. It turns out to be a 20-yard gain for the Gamecocks. Now, at the end, they come back. It's only a 28-20 final score. That turned out to be the difference. I mean, that's just where Florida's season's at right now. Malik Zaire gets hurt in this one. Felipe Franks comes back in. More of the same from him. Nothing exceptional. Lack of playmakers on the outside. Florida sitting at 3-6. Worst start since, 1979.
Yeah. My son and I are watching the game together, and we saw that play happen, the pick by C.J. Henderson, and the
right.
We both died laughing at the same time. I mean, that is Florida's season in a nutshell.
Now, here's the thing about Florida, Bob. You got to remember, if Kentucky remembers to put 11 people on the field in Knoxville that night, and if they don't complete a Hail Mary against Tennessee, they're 1-8.
In Knoxville? They played that game in Knoxville?
And you know what I'm saying.
Lexington?
So I'm all over the place. In Lexington. They're 1-8.
I agree.
They're 1-8. Doesn't matter who's coaching. Doesn't matter who's playing.
Well,
I mean, this is unbelievable what's happened to Florida.
Down at the Swamp. All right, Jake Bentley. Got to talk about Jake Bentley. I'm not really sure what to make of Jake Bentley from week to week. He gets picked off 3 times, doesn't throw a touchdown pass in this game, but at the end, push comes to shove. He runs for a touchdown, gets his team out to a 28-13 lead, and does what needs to be done to game manage, for lack of a better word, to get his team to victory.
Hey, they're 7-3. I think if you'd have told South Carolina fans before the season started that they'd be sitting at 7-3, who do they have ahead of them? They got Wofford coming up, and then, of course, the showdown with Clemson. So I think the Clemson game at the end of the season is going to be a great barometer for where's this program at. I think we can all agree that they're pointed in the right direction, but that's going to be a true test for them as far as what they've accomplished this year, where they're heading. And great news for Gamecock fans is that Deebo Samuel announced earlier in the week that he's coming back for his senior year. So you'll have Bentley, you'll have Samuel, you'll have some opportunities next year to continue this growth. I mean, Muschamp, what can you say?
You mentioned the 7-3 record.
Right.
If you go by just the odds, they're going to finish 8-4. They're going to beat Wofford. They're going to lose to Clemson. I don't know. But
sounds good.
You have to give out Coach of the Year award
in the Southeastern Conference.
In the Southeastern Conference, is it Will Muschamp?
You know what? You could make a strong case for them with all the injuries and stuff they've had to overcome, and just where they were as a program when they got here. I tell you what, he wins that Clemson game. The answer is yes. I don't know
absolutely.
how they. I don't
you
know
go 9-3. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He inherited a team 2 years ago that won just 3 games.
You know, and here's the thing about Will Muschamp is the mess that he inherited. I mean, this program had no talent. They had a quarterback in Jake Bentley last year, came on as a freshman. He's exceeded expectations. Now you have some building blocks where moving forward, it's going to be a little bit easier conversation to go into somebody's living room and convince them to come play football at your school. And that's where you want to be if you're South Carolina, because that wasn't an easy conversation when Spurrier walked out the door.
All right, let's talk about Florida for a moment. Because they had that canceled game against Northern Colorado at the start of the season, they've only got 2 games left. They're 3-6. They're not going to get to 6 wins.
No.
They could get to a bowl, one of those 5-7 teams, but unlikely. How bad is the condition of this Gators program right now?
It's pretty bad. You mentioned the fact that there's no bowl. Well, what happens with no bowl is you miss a month of practice.
Yep.
This team can't afford to miss a month of practice. They've got some serious questions to answer on both sides of the ball. You got some of their top prospects decommitting from the program because of the uncertainty with the coaching staff. They need somebody to come in there and grab the bull by the horns, get back on the recruiting trail. It's an easy sell. You know what I mean? If you're rebuilding Florida, it's an easy sell. Guys like Steve Spurrier, some of these guys that are tied to the program, Tim Tebow, whatever, they would get involved and help resell it. I think it would be a quicker turnaround than some of these other programs in the SEC, but they need to get on it. They need to get on it quick. They got to figure it out.
We always look at Florida as being one of the best jobs in the country, as fertile as a recruiting ground as you can get. If Florida finishes the season with a 3-8 record or 4-7 record, how much do coaches out there, these non-Power 5 coaches and assistant coaches, how much do they want this job? How much in demand is this job?
That's a good question. I think if you're a more established coach, let's just say like a Chip Kelly or just for argument's sakes, I don't think he's coming back to coach a Bob Stoops. No, I'm just saying, I'm throwing guys that are established. Right. I don't know that they'd be willing to jump into a situation like that. I think what you could get is guys, younger guys who are looking for an opportunity, who are hungry to get in, but that's going to be a harder resell. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not really established. So it's going to be a very interesting process as far as who they bring in. Everybody wants to mention Dan Mullen, but Dan Mullen addressed that again this week, saying, look, everybody assumes that when we have success here in Starkville, any of these positions that open, especially at Florida and the SEC, that I'm going to be, willing to do that. He's like, what if I like it here? What if my family's happy here in Starkville, which we are? So the fact that Fitzgerald's coming back next year, maybe Dan Mullen doesn't go anywhere.
Check that. Kansas State coach Bill Snyder's 78 years old.
Oh, is he going to Florida?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just hear me out here, okay?
That'd be interesting. I'd like to see that.
Steve Spurrier.
A lot of people go to Florida when they retire.
Early 70s. If you're a Florida fan and Spurrier says, you know what, I'll come back for a year or two and write this program, would you be excited about that?
Oh, absolutely. They would do it in a heartbeat if he would be willing to do it. But the way the whole South Carolina thing unfolded, he's got to be enjoying playing golf and living the life that he is, doing his Dr. Pepper commercials and whatnot. But I just don't see it. But you never know with the old ball coach. I tell you what, it'd be great for guys like us.
It would. It'd be headlines. It would be talking points. All right, let's move on. My producer, Mark, is getting in my ear. Texas Pete Scoreboard. Texas Pete, spice up your tailgate. LSU beats up on Arkansas 33-10. Close in the first half, but the Tigers do run their record to 7-3 at Tennessee and then home to Texas A&M. They're looking pretty good to go 9-3 on the season. Coach O has got this team rolling.
Yeah, and you know what? You got that feather in your cap that you beat Auburn.
Absolutely.
That's a huge win for them, and they still got a couple games left. LSU is at Tennessee. It's Tennessee. That's exactly what they want right now. They want an LSU team coming in their backyard.
A physical LSU team
right.
after you've just given up 400 yards rushing
and then
to Missouri.
And then you got the A&M game at the end of the year, which I think is going to be an interesting game for both schools, because I think if Texas A&M wins it, you can somewhat save the season. If that makes any sense. If you're LSU, you win it, you finish, 9-3, whatever the situation. Yeah, 9-3. So we'll see. But Darius Geis is healthy again for the first time all year. You see it again. Yesterday he gets the ball, another big game, 147 yards on the ground. And Danny Etling, last week you saw Brandon get in and play a little bit, the backup quarterback against Alabama. But, it was the Etling show yesterday. He got all the carries.
Let's talk about Geis first. We'll get to Etling. 147 yards, as you mentioned, closing in on 1,000 for the season, 3 touchdowns. When healthy, is he as good as any back in the SEC?
I tell you what, I take Kerryon Johnson over him every day of the week and twice on Saturday.
Right. Well, you don't have to disparage this.
I'm not disparaging, but it's more of a credit to Kerryon Johnson, man. I mean, yesterday, I saw him in the Ole Miss game, but again, you might be able to go for 250 against Ole Miss. But Kerryon Johnson yesterday, man, that guy's an animal.
All right, I'm a fan of Geis. I like the way he runs the football. I like the way he hangs in there. And
the reality of it, it's Arkansas, man. But by the way, this game was like, what was it, 16 to 10, like in the fourth quarter? This is a close game.
It was a close game throughout the first half, early third quarter, but you could kind of see LSU beating on them a little bit and that the tide was going to turn. And Arkansas, 4-6, 1-5 in the SEC. Home to Mississippi State, home to Missouri. Neither one is going to be an easy game. Does Brett Bielema need to win both, lock up a bowl bid to keep his job?
First of all, they're not going to win either one of those games, in my opinion. And I think he's gone at the end of the year. I think that, honestly,
if they win both games, he's gone at the end of the year. They get to a bowl game, he's gone at the end of the year.
I mean, Mike, have you been watching this disaster all year? I mean, they can't get out of their own way. I think that part of them was rooting for Gus Malzahn to get beat yesterday, because if Auburn fired him, that's the first phone call they're making. Gus, come home.
He's not leaving Auburn.
No, if they fired him.
I got you.
Yeah.
If they fired him, I got you.
Yeah, that'd be the first phone call they would make.
Yeah, well, they went that route before it didn't turn out so good with the homegrown product. Houston Nutt, though, is a good guy. I'll just say that. All right, let's
He's
move.
doing a good job as an analyst.
He is doing a good job. He's very personable. He's a
great.
great guy. I mean, he really does have a nice personality. Let's take you back to the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Texas Pete drama for your mouth. Missouri.
Yeah.
50-7. This game was tied at 17 at one point, by the way, but 50-17 the final. Mizzou has now won 4 straight. Vols have lost 5 of 6. Mizzou runs for 433 in this game. Ish Witter. I don't even know who this kid is. He runs for 216 yards. He had run for more than 83 yards just once all season.
Yeah. He was third string coming into the season as well. So opportunity presented itself. He has taken the opportunity and ran with it, no pun intended. Drew Lock, after the game, called him the unquestioned leader of the team. And, the more that this season is evolving for the Missouri Tigers, I'm a Barry Odom fan. At first, it looked like he was in over his head. They got some winnable games, credit to their schedule, but they've used that opportunity to get better. And the running game now, the last couple weeks, has been a huge factor in their wins. So they have a chance. Missouri, who do they finish up with here? They got at Vanderbilt and at Arkansas. Yeah. 2 very winnable games, 2 of the worst defenses in the SEC. So Missouri, a 6-game winning streak after a 6-game losing.
7-5 after starting 1-5, which would be incredible. Right. Mizzou in the last 4 games scored 68 points, 52, 45, 50. Last night, the total offense, 659, as we said, 433 on the ground. I don't get how they flipped the switch, and this is a dramatically different team than what we saw just 5 weeks ago.
It just shows you how much it plays a hand in college athletics.
Kids, right?
Right. They start to buy in, and Missouri, the job that they've done offensively, but give the defense a little bit of credit. You show up defensively last night, and
Tennessee. I mean, boy, that's a juggernaut there. You don't want to mess with that offense.
Four turnovers again for the Volunteers last night. Garantano doesn't play. Just a mess of a season. I love the comments coming in saying, "Oh, well, Butch Jones is gone today." Look, if they didn't fire Butch Jones after the Georgia game, they're waiting to the end of the season, which is 2 weeks away. Which is, as I predicted, just want to throw this out there. Vanderbilt and Tennessee are both going to be 0-7 in conference, and it is going to be the showdown of all showdowns as to who goes winless in the SEC.
So, Butch, in your estimation, they're 4-6. They've lost 5 of 6. Home to LSU, home to Vandy. Maybe they go 1-1 in that and finish 5-7.
Can you get tickets for that LSU Tennessee game?
Are there tickets looking online? Get some good seats for $50. So you don't think they'll pull the plug until after the season, since they haven't done it already?
I can't imagine it. I mean, it would be such a curious time to do it. But my question is, with the early signing period for these head coaches now, the initiative to get somebody else in there to coach, to go ahead and fire a guy to start the process of hiring the next head coach, doesn't it kind of expedite things a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. I think the early signing period starts December 20th. There's a dead period as well, so you got to have these guys in place ASAP after your season is over. Last week in November, I mean, bam. I can see them telling him before the final game against Vanderbilt, "Hey, Coach, you're not coming back," making it public, and this way they can actually start the public search, because we know that the private search is already started.
Better job, Tennessee or Florida, in your opinion?
Florida, just because of recruiting.
Right.
Yeah. So fertile. I mean, you don't have to go more than 100 miles really to get a full recruiting class.
Was the Philip Fulmer decision, was that the turning point for Tennessee, or was it Kiffin turning out going to California?
Well, I think it was before Philip Fulmer left. The last few years of the Philip Fulmer era kind of remind me of Texas and Mac Brown.
Right.
They just rested on their laurels, let the program slide, and all of a sudden, instead of being here, you're here, and now you've got to come up to where you were.
It's just been going like this ever since.
It's tough, yeah.
If you're Florida, real quick while we're on this, if you're Florida, do you call Lane Kiffin? Mark,
No,
do you call Lane Kiffin?
Yeah. Hey, how you
He
doing,
won't even
Lane?
address the question.
Come on.
Yeah,
Lane.
absolutely you call him. Man can coach. He's a pain in the rump, but he can coach.
Greatest coach in Tennessee history, by the way, is the general, Robert Nealon. His record at Tennessee, 173-31.
Wow.
I mean, for Tennessee to get a coach to come even remotely close to that, it just doesn't look like it's even possible anytime in the near future. But, Tennessee, it's a mess up there. Florida's still a more jumbled program at this point in time. No.
Man, they're both kind of messed up, which is good for Georgia.
It's good for and everyone else in the SEC East. All right, take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Kentucky lights up Vanderbilt 44-21 to win its 7th game and earn Mark Stoops a 1-year contract extension. He's now through 2022. Benny Snell rushes for 116, 3 scores. Kyle Shermer sacked 5 times. And Kentucky clearly the better team on the football field last night.
You mentioned the 1-year extension. That comes with $5 million, by the way. Also, with that 1-year extension comes 207 wins, comes a $250,000 signing bonus. So Coach Stoops made $5.25 million with that win yesterday. So drinks are on him. Hey, Kentucky, how about responding after the tough loss the week before to Ole Miss? Going on the road. Granted, it's Vanderbilt, but this game wasn't in question. I mean, they just ran it down their throats. Didn't even really try to do anything cute and fancy, but that's what good teams do. When you lose a disappointing game like that, you go on the road, you respond. So full credit then. Benny Snell, by the way, another season over 1,000 yards, 28 rushing touchdowns for his career. That's a school record. By the way, he's a sophomore. So Kentucky football moving in the right direction. Tough opponent next week on the road against a rebounding Georgia.
Mark Stoops took over that team 5 years ago. It's a 2-10 team. He's obviously elevated this team to where they're getting into their 2nd straight bowl game. How do you grade him? You give him a grade of, I don't know, is he a B+? Is he an A? Is he an A coach?
I think so. I mean, you talked about the state of the program, and the one thing about Kentucky football year after year after year is they were SEC East bottom dwellers. And to just have them in the conversation to be middle of the pack and bowl eligible year after year, which are the expectations at Kentucky, I don't think that their fan base is expecting to compete for an SEC championship, maybe soon if he continues to grow the program like this. But hey, if you're SEC football, all of a sudden you're bowl eligible year after year after year, and that's how you build these things. He's done an outstanding job, in my opinion.
I think Kentucky's very pleased that he's locked into this contract extension. I don't know what the buyouts are, but man, if you're Florida or you're Tennessee, here's a guy that would look pretty darn attractive. Not that he's going anywhere. I don't think he is. I think he's very happy where he is, and he's elevated this program to where right now it's a better job than Tennessee, but man, he would look good to some other teams around the country.
He's done a great job, on both sides of the ball. They've established an identity. That offensive line that they built, their upper tier, top 5 offensive line in the SEC, I believe. So, full credit to them, man. They got a lot of football left ahead of them. They got a chance, at Georgia to really show what they're worth next week, and then they close out with their in-state rival against Bobby Petrino in Louisville, and who wouldn't like to beat him? I mean, come on. So they got a lot.
All right, back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Ole Miss at it again. Comes up with another W with a great offensive showing, 50-22 the final count over Louisiana Lafayette. Jordan Ta'amu, 28 of 36, 418 yards, 3 touchdowns. Here's all I have to say to Shea Patterson. Son, you should have never gotten hurt.
Right, he got Wally pipped.
Here's
the thing. So the statistic that I heard was Ta'amu and Patterson are only the third set of quarterbacks in the last 25 years to throw over 350 yards in 4 separate games. So they've had 2 guys throw for 350 yards in 4 separate games this year for them. So is it a product of the offense, I ask you, or do they just have 2 very special quarterbacks? They got great wide receivers.
His 3 starts, 368, 382, 418. I mean, how is that even possible?
I think you give a lot of credit to Lodge and Brown, these 2 wide receivers they have on the outside. They're going to be first, second-round picks in the National Football League. Brown had 180 yards receiving on 12 catches at halftime yesterday. At halftime.
What do you do with Matt Luke? You're 5-5 now,
right?
You go 6-6. Is he back?
I think he's shown
tremendous
resiliency. Are you looking for a
bigger name coach?
I think he's shown tremendous resiliency. Now the problem is going to be the question I'm asking is what kind of salesman is he? Because you're going to have to do a heck of a job convincing me and my family, if I have a son that's going to play college football, as to why he should go to Ole Miss. And what's your sales pitch? To be a part of rebuild the image of Ole Miss, right? Mm-hmm. Because of what happened there with is he a guy that can do that? Because you're going to need a salesman to build this program back to where they expect to be.
All right, back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Texas A&M takes on New Mexico. Predictable outcome, 55-14. Aggies now 6-4 on the season. Finish at Ole Miss, at LSU. Probably need to win both of these games to save Kevin Sumlin's job. The athletic director put it on the line before the season even started. I'm not even sure wins in both of these games gets it done, from what we're hearing and the expectations of the Aggie fan base.
I think that we talked about this a little early on after Texas A&M got the win at Florida, that it might be a mutual decision at the end of the year that they walk away. And that might be because, you look at Starkville yesterday. He was impressive. We talked about Kellen Mond all year. Don't forget Starkville's a redshirt freshman. They have 2 starting wide receivers that are freshmen as well that had huge games yesterday. Christian Kirk's probably gone. But, I mean, when you look at this Texas A&M team on both sides of the ball, they're very young. And Kevin Sumlin has shown what he can do with quarterbacks given time. But I don't know that Kevin Sumlin wants to be a part of this. It just seems like they don't seem to respect anything that he's done there, any of the accomplishments that he's had. But, an opportunity, Ole Miss at LSU is that game. I think if they win at LSU to end the season, you end on a tremendous high note, and I think everybody's happy and possibly the whole gang's back together for next year.
Scott Woodward, by the way, gets a bonus, the athletic director, for A&M qualifying for a bowl.
9th straight year. 9th straight year they've gone to a bowl. They've won 28 straight home games against non-conference opponents. I mean, Texas A&M, sure, they've come up short against the bigger opponents, Alabama, LSU. We know the history there. But with the youth and the core that they have there, I think the potential is great for them to grow together.
A&M, Florida, Tennessee, ranking those jobs. Which one's first in the pecking order?
I think Texas A&M, even though they're in the West. I think Texas A&M, because of the youth they have at the skill position. You got a quarterback, which is the hardest thing in the world to find, and you got 2 skill guys on the outside. I think that and they've proven. Here's the other thing about Texas A&M is they put guys in the NFL, big time. So what do kids want to do when they come to play college football? They want to play in the NFL. Say, hey, you want to play on Sundays? Come be a part of us, especially offensive players.
Our producer Mark is over there like this. A&M. Yeah, A&M's got the money.
Let me tell you something. Florida's not broke.
Tennessee is not broke. They might not have the A&M money. A&M's got a lot of boosters sitting on the sideline waiting to pay someone the big dollars. Really do.
Well, it's very competitive in Texas, as you know, with Texas, TCU, Baylor, all the schools that they have to compete against recruiting. But I just like that combination of the youth that they have, the core building pieces. I mean, if I'm a coach looking at a situation, especially an offensive-minded coach, I don't have to worry about a quarterback and receivers for the next 3 years. I'm in.
All right, Texas Pete Scoreboard, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Want to go to the standings in the SEC, start with the East.
Let's do it.
Georgia, of course, is already clinched despite yesterday's loss. Dogs sitting good as they face Kentucky and then out of conference, I should say, game against rival Georgia Tech. But South Carolina, we talked about Will Muschamp, maybe Coach of the Year. If not Muschamp, Kentucky wins 2 games to finish. It's going to be tough. You got to beat Georgia. It's probably not going to happen on the road. But Mark Stoops is a candidate as well.
He is. You have 3 teams in the SEC East that can't beat anybody but each other right now. In Florida, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. They can't beat anybody but each other. Look, Georgia, they got punched in the mouth yesterday. I think we all agree that it's in front of them. If they win the SEC, they'll be in the tournament. But, I mean, how do you respond? Are they as good as that, some people think they are? They're going to find out. I mean, they will be tested in that SEC championship again.
You're giving Coach of the Year award out right now. Is it Kirby Smart? Is it Will Muschamp? Is it Mark Stoops?
I tell you what,
I'm putting you on the spot.
If Gus Malzahn wins the Iron Bowl, it's probably Gus Malzahn.
Gus is not in this conversation.
Well, why are you giving me choices? So I think it's Kirby Smart. I think the job that he's done, 9-0, opportunity to go to the tournament, I think Kirby Smart's done a great job. And that's not discount the recruiting. I mean, the recruiting momentum for the University of Georgia right now is on an all-time high, and he's the reason why.
All right, Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Want to show you the standings in the West. Alabama, Auburn, both control their own destiny despite the Tigers having those 2 overall losses and 1 in the conference. LSU has rebounded nicely. Mississippi State, man, it's tough being in the SEC West. That's a 7-3 team.
Yeah.
If they're anywhere else, they could be 9-1 right now.
Man, look at how much better the West is than the East. It really is. And when you talk about the SEC and strength of schedule, and you're going to hear the pundits out there about Alabama hasn't played anybody. Oh, well, look at their strength of schedule. Well, look at the SEC West, man. I mean, those are some good football teams that are. You just mentioned Mississippi State, LSU. We'll find out what happens against Auburn, but the SEC West is tough. Maybe not as tough as in years past, where you got 3 teams in the top 10, 4 teams in the top 10, like they did the one year, but. It's as good as there is. It's as good a division as there is in college football, without question.
We played 4 games. We played 10 games, and there are 4 teams in the SEC West that haven't given up 200 points. It's less than 200 points. I mean, that's saying something in this day and age where you have, look at it right there, Alabama in 10 games given up 112 points. Auburn, LSU, Mississippi State. That's pretty darn good defense in this day and age.
The other thing I notice about when I look at those teams, outside of Arkansas, who's the only team that can't get out of their own way, look at that, 358 points they've given up this year. Those other 6 teams, they're still playing for something, man. They're out there competing. And, back to Ole Miss, they've known all season long that they weren't playing for anything.
Right.
And, the fact that they're out there fighting week in and week out, it's tremendous credit for their coaching staff.
All right, you want to hand out some game balls?
Please. I've been wanting to hand out game balls.
Let me set you up for this because you always want to go in reverse order. Yeah, we're going to give out the defensive game ball first.
Defensive game ball.
Yeah.
I'll give it to Kentucky. I thought Kentucky stepped up. Last week, the week before against Ole Miss, they were just embarrassed. And to get them the win yesterday, I know it was a Vanderbilt team, but this could have been a turning point in their season. Vanderbilt was favored in this game. Kentucky did an outstanding job shutting down the running game, made Sherman throw it over 40 times. So give that side of the ball tremendous respect. Kentucky was impressive on defense yesterday.
Nice. I got to give it up for Auburn.
Well, that's the obvious one.
It's
I want to let
obvious
you
one.
take that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I need the obvious ones. But Georgia comes into this game with one of the top rushing offenses in the country. They're in the top 5, I believe. And Auburn just shuts them down. Georgia's averaging nearly 300 yards a game on the ground, get 46. 46 on 32 carries. Yeah, there's a couple of sacks mixed in there. Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift, arguably the best three-headed running back tandem in the nation, completely neutralized.
Talking to an Auburn fan yesterday at the gym, and I know it's surprising, like, what were you doing at the gym? He said to me,
game day, you're at the gym?
In the morning, you get it out of the way before.
Okay.
And an Auburn fan, he says to me, he says, you know, Nick Chubb's 13 yards. He set me up for this. He's 13 yards away from passing Bo Jackson. I said, yeah. He goes, he's not getting it today. I was like, yeah, that's a good one because it's only 13 yards. What do you run for 33?
Yeah,
he wasn't too far off.
Right. And Georgia gets just 230 yards total in this game.
And 100 of that was in trash time. Like I said, midway through the third quarter, they had 77 yards of total offense and 75 yards of penalties.
All right.
That's all you need to know.
Want to give out an offensive game ball?
Yeah, I thought Calvin Ridley yesterday was outstanding.
Phenomenal.
I mean, not only the game winner, but the play early on in the game to make it 14-14, where Hurts rolls out right, extends the play, throws the ball down the right side. I mean, he yesterday was what we anticipated going into this year, being the true playmaker in the Southeastern Conference at that position. And I think he's the X factor for Alabama going into Auburn. Because if you take away the run game like Mississippi State did in the first half yesterday, 44 yards for Alabama, he's going to be single coverage. If he's single coverage out there, he's going to get open. So if Hurts can get time and be accurate with his throws, I just think that he's the X factor. Great game. Game of the year for him yesterday.
It's not Julio Jones, a little bit different receiver, but man, he is putting up some numbers and he's looking phenomenal.
He played a great game.
I'm giving out my offensive game ball to Kerryon Johnson. You know, he sat out the loss to Clemson. Just remember that. He did not play in that game. It was a 14-3 game, and all the pressure in the world was on Stidham. He sat that game out. If he would have played in that game, who knows? Also, he rushes for 167, carries it 32 times, a workhorse. Also, a couple of catches for 66 yards. The screen pass takes it in for the touchdown. He's been at his best against the best. LSU, he ran for $156. Mississippi State, he ran for $112. I'm giving it up for number 21. Another outstanding game.
And he's not a liability in the passing game. And he's a guy that can catch the ball. You know, typically you don't see big backs doing that, but he's a guy who they'll draw up some plays with that too. At what point is he going to be mentioned in the Heisman Trophy? At some point, he's got to be in consideration when you talk about some of the other guys who've kind of fallen back a little bit. I mean, it's Baker Mayfield's trophy. He's not going to lose this thing. I mean, he's running away with it.
Well,
but I think Kerryon Johnson has to be in the conversation. The performance that he's had the last half of the season has been just outstanding.
I agree. And how much better does he get when Petway is ready to play? Or does that minimize Kerryon Johnson to a certain extent? Because he seems to be one of these kids that the more he carries it, the better he gets.
Well, if that's the case, that's good news for Auburn because they don't expect Petway back until the national championship or at least the semifinals. So if that's actually a conversation that we're having, that's good news for Auburn fans.
All right, final thought. Let me tell you this. Yesterday's results didn't hurt Georgia as far as getting to the national championship game. They can still get there. Or the playoff.
Yep.
Same for Alabama, same for Auburn. However, I think it did hurt the SEC in that I'm not sure of any scenario where the SEC gets more than one team in now.
No, unless some teams really fall back to the pack. My question is this. If Alabama loses to Auburn and Georgia goes to the SEC championship, and then Georgia, how does Alabama, if Alabama's left out, are they an 11-1 team
Yes.
that their only loss is to the SEC champion Auburn Tigers,
Yes.
and you're left out of the playoffs?
I think so.
Even with you take into consideration their body of work from Nick Saban and the teams of the past?
You're going to have an ACC team in there, whether it be Miami or Clemson, with just one loss or maybe unbeaten. One of the ACC teams is in there. Oklahoma, if it has just one loss, is going to be in there. Oklahoma likely has to face TCU again in the Big 12 championship game. So there's two teams right there. I think Wisconsin wins the Big the Big Ten. They're in.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And all of a sudden, it's looking like, maybe this team can win the Big Ten.
I think the best 4 teams that I've seen in college football this year are Clemson, Miami, Alabama, and Auburn. I think the 4 best teams just happen to be 2 from each conference. And at the end of the day, yes, a Wisconsin loss would be tremendous. You had to get Notre Dame out of there. Notre Dame's gone. I think everybody's happy about that. You got to get Wisconsin out of there. So Wisconsin more than likely is going to have to beat a Michigan team this weekend. I think all eyes will be on Madison this weekend. A tremendous game. Harbaugh will have them fired up for that. And then, of course, in the championship game, more than likely Ohio State. Look, Ohio State, look at what they just did to Iowa, man. I don't think that Wisconsin, people are assuming that Wisconsin's going to beat an Ohio State team. I don't see that. Ohio State would probably be a 7-point favorite in that game.
Depends which Ohio State team shows up. The one that lost to Iowa? I don't know.
Well, we'll see. But I don't, when it's all said and done, I think Wisconsin takes a loss.
You know, it's interesting. This whole time, this whole season, my mindset, and I think the mindset of SEC fans is we may get 2 teams in.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, when you think about this, if Miami goes undefeated through the regular season and they lose to Clemson in a very, very close ACC title game, well-played game, could the ACC get 2 teams
I think
in?
so. I think that's what we're looking at right now. Miami being undefeated, Clemson's only loss being on the road, at Syracuse with the backup quarterback. I think before it's all said and done, I think that's what happens. I think you get 2 teams in there. I think the SEC champion is the other one, and the only other argument you have is what happens to Wisconsin. And then the only way the SEC is going to get 2 teams in there is if Alabama beats Auburn, you have an undefeated Alabama playing a 1-loss Georgia, and Georgia beats Alabama, and then you have 2 1-loss teams sitting there 11-1 in Alabama and Georgia. Maybe they both get in to join Clemson and Miami, but every time I try to figure this thing out, something crazy happens, and then the whole thing gets thrown out the window.
All right, what are you doing next Sunday at 10 a.m.?
Next Sunday at 10 a.m., I'm doing the Texas
Available?
Pete
SEC Scoreboard Show.
SEC Scoreboard Show with my friend Bob Pasella.
All right, we will see you next Sunday morning. Have a great week. Can't wait. Can't wait till next Saturday. The games might not look good on paper, but tell you what, folks, I'm watching. We'll see you then.
See you.